Hi my friends, and welcome back to the channel. As you guys can see by the title of this video, we're going to be doing my January and February reading wrap up. Now, so far I've read a total of 13 books within those months, and I've read 4 in January, and for February I read about 9 books. All of these, well, most of these are in vlogs because a couple of them was in a vlog that I was going to do in February, but the footage for that got deleted and I could not recover it to save my life. This is also where I'm going to kind of go through my TBR as well too. So we're first going to start out with January. And for my January TBR, I read 3 out of the 6 books. The only ones that I did not read was Face Off, Skin, and The Storied Life of A.J. Thickery. I could not figure out how to put them into videos in general, so that's where that is and such. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Let's go on to the first book that I read in January and such, and that is Playing for Keeps by Alexandra Bellefleur. I got this as an ARC last year, I believe, and it was published, I believe, at the top of this year in January. And I read it maybe a couple days before it actually got published and such. And I gave it a 4-star. And I think I would still give it a 4-star. Basically what this follows is these 2 publicists who follow kind of like the equivalent of Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift in our world right now, at least, in America specifically. And it's sapphic. As you can see, you have Poppy and Rosalind, and they kind of have a mutual benefit of being forced proximity because their clients are dating each other, and then something kind of blooms between them, and you kind of follow from there. I thought it was cute. I thought it was really, really fun. It was definitely on the spice level, and I will say this book definitely opened up my feelings to trying spice again, because as of recently, I have not been very satisfied with the way that some spice has been written in some books. And also I was kind of in a little bit of a romance dry spell in December, so when I picked up this one, wasn't too sure if I was gonna like it or not, and then I ended up really, really liking it. So that was the first book that I read at the beginning of the year and also in January. And then the second one that I don't actually have the physical copy for because I loaned it out to a friend, but the movie did come out in January, and that was People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. And I've read a couple of Emily Henry books, and basically what this one is about is it follows these 2 friends named Poppy and Alex. They met in college. They are very much opposites of each other, and each year they go on a vacation together, whether it is somewhere kind of tropical or cold or whatever, and you kind of follow them throughout this. And one summer something happens between the 2 of them, and they just stop talking completely, pretty much. And then Poppy's kind of in a little bit of a rut where she just is not sure where she's at, and people ask her when was the last time you were happy, and that was with Alex. So she kind of convinces him to go on a little vacation together to pretty much kind of figure out what exactly happened between the 2 of them and why their friendship kind of ended and things like that. I did enjoy it. I gave it a 3.5 and such, and I still stand by that because it is definitely not my favorite romance of hers, honestly. Nora and Charlie's will always be my favorite personally, but I did like the friendship aspect and how they were friends first before they did anything romantic with each other. So that was that. And I also did a vlog as well too where I compared the book to the movie, and I will say in retrospect the book was a lot better. And one of my complaints that I feel Emily Henry does this good, honestly, but I really wish we could have gotten Alex's point of view on the whole situation and how they were feeling about each other, I will say, she can write. I really do like her stuff. But again, this one was not my personal favorite of hers, to say the least. But I did enjoy it a lot more than the movie. So if you want to see my full thoughts on that, it's a spoiler vlog. Feel free to check that out if you want to. And then this next one that I read was also in that same same video of This Video Ends When I Find My First 5-Star of 2026, and that was The Final Gambit by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I gave this initially a 4-star, but then when thinking back on it, it's more like a 3.5, to be honest with you, because my thing with this series, it kind of basically follows the events after the Hawthorne legacy and kind of following this woman named Avery, who she inherits a bunch of money from this billionaire that she did not know personally, and you kind of follow from there. It's kind of like a murder, not really a murder mystery, but just a mysterious aspect of things with puzzles and things like that. And you follow after the second book with this one. And I had first initially read the first 2 books in 2024, I think it was. And the second one really kind of bummed me because it kind of lost its edge from after the halfway mark. I just kind of stopped caring. And then with this one, I didn't really care until maybe the last 50 pages of this book. Honestly, I did not really care that much. And it sounds like that I don't like it, but I do. I did like some elements of it, mostly because of the questions that we got answered to, and from the other books beforehand of why Avery was chosen in the first place to inherit this money. And it was, like I said, it was good, but I definitely think I'm going to put a hold on this before I continue the series, or even if I will continue the series, because I loved The Naturals by her. I want to do a rereading of The Naturals soon. Probably I'll do that in the summertime. And I figured that I would really like the way that Jennifer wrote this, but for something about it, I wasn't really too attached to the characters. I don't care about the romance. I do not fucking care. Do not care about the love triangle whatsoever when it comes to this. And it low-key did kind of disappoint me, but it didn't disappoint me too much. I really thought that I was really gonna love this, and I really thought it was gonna be a 5-star, but alas, it was a 3.5. And I will say, I think I would probably recommend this. I think if you are a little bit younger, if you were maybe 16, 17, 18, then maybe you would like it. But if you're in your 20s, whether it's early, mid, or late 20s, or even your early 30s as well, I don't think you would really like it, because of the fact that this one felt a little bit more juvenile than the rest. I don't know why. And it also just kind of we just kind of went through the same motions kind of over and over again. But yeah, like I said, it's an interesting thing. I don't completely hate this series. I do want to see kind of what happens, because I'm kind of intrigued to see, after everything that's transpired in this, how it continues for the rest of the series. But it's so long that I'm not too sure that I could truly be up for it, especially right now. But maybe I will come back to that in the future. But that's The Final Gambit. This next one that I have was my first 5-star of 2025, and that is Us Against You by Frederick Bachman. I have only read 2 books by him as of right now I'm talking to you and such. I read Beartown last year in November, maybe December time, I think it was. Absolutely loved it so much. That one was a 5-star. Loved it so much. Us Against You, just even better, honestly. It is a book that follows after the events of Beartown, and basically what it kind of follows is a group of people from this town called Beartown. It's a ice hockey town, and they've kind of fallen a little bit kind of behind, but then this junior team pretty much has a chance to kind of put Beartown back on the map. So they put a bunch of pressure on these teenagers to kind of do their thing. Something happens a little bit after something going on with a hockey game or whatsoever, and it really changes the dynamic of how this town works. And do look up trigger warnings, because this talks about a lot of really horrible things, but is something that I think people should read if like you want to as well. And again, this one follows like literally right after the events of Beartown, and his writing style is something where I truly am just in awe, honestly. Us Against You quotes. I'm looking up quotes right now because even though I knew that I would love this book, I don't annotate or tab any books until I've reread them pretty much. And he has such a beautiful way of talking about the mundane and things like that, honestly. Like one quote that I remember really loving, and that is, "Everyone is 100 different things, but in other people's eyes, we usually get the chance to be only one of them." That quote, that one's out of context and such, but it just kind of gives you a feeling of why exactly his writing is so gorgeous. And he talks about a lot of stuff that like can like be very triggering to a lot of people. I'm a person that doesn't really get triggered that often by things and books. I can get annoyed, but I don't get triggered. And just the way that he's able to convey everybody's feelings. Like I said, you follow multiple people within this story. You follow teenagers, kids, adults, young adults, elderly people, and things like that. And it follows like after like these things or whatever, and like having a chance to like potentially like do better for the community. And he's able to just capture what it's like to kind of be in a small town, no matter what, because this takes place in Sweden, I believe. And it reminded me so much of the small town that I grew up in. Not as bad as the people in Beartown, but I've known people in this book that are like the people in Beartown. Like I have classmates and acquaintances that are just like some of these people in this book. Granted, it's a hard thing to read about, but it's also kind of necessary at the same time. Like another quote that I would say is really gorgeous is this one. "It's hard to care about people, exhausting in fact, because empathy is a complicated thing. It requires us to accept that everyone else's lives are also going on the whole time. We have no pause button for when everything gets too much for us to deal with, but then neither does anyone else." And that perfectly encapsulates the human experience and what exactly happens in this book, because it really is truly hard to care about people, and it really kind of complicates to like, no, it really kind of speaks volumes to also what's going on in this current administration as well, which I will rant about that later. But I really do think that you should read this book if you do like fiction, and if you really like character-driven stories. You are going to love a lot of these characters, but also hate a lot of these characters because of how character-driven this story is. I think that's all I have to say on Us Against You. And I did take a little bit of a break. I want to read The Winner soon, but that one's gonna break me. This one didn't make me cry, I will say that, but I feel like The Winners is more than likely going to make me cry because of the fact that the events that happened after this one, it's gonna hurt me, to say the least. But those are all of the books that I actually read in January, and there was only one book from January that I DNF'd, and that was From Luke Off with Love. I DNF'd that at like 14%. I tried to read it with a friend of mine. She was rereading it, and she was asking like, "Hey, have you ever read Mariana Zapata?" And I was like, "No." But I was curious to read her stuff, and she's like, "Oh, I'm rereading From Luke Off with Love. Do you want to read it with me?" And I was like, yeah, sure. So we started that when she was on her winter break. Now she's back at college and such. And it took me so long to get through chapter 2 to chapter 3 because of the fact she yaps and yaps about things that don't really, like, in my opinion, I didn't think really pertain to the story or like why she was talking about it in the first place, you know? know? So that was my only DNF from January and such. But now on to February. Like I said, I read about 9 books, and the genres will be somewhere on the screen as well too. And as for my February TBR, I have read 3 out of the 6 so far. The ones that I still need to read is First Time Caller, Needful Things, and Anxious People. I did not get to Anxious People, unfortunately, so I want to try and see if I can get that later this year, but we shall see, honestly. Starting off with the first book that I read and finished in February is technically off of my January TBR, and that is On Writing by Stephen King. This was originally supposed to be in a video where Spotify chose how many hours I read in a day, but that footage got lost, so a lot of my feelings got lost on that pretty much. But this is his memoir of writing pretty much, and I listen to it because when it comes to nonfiction, I tend to take in the information more when I listen rather than actually reading it, because it can sometimes get a little bit boring. But if you guys don't know this, I've been trying to write my debut novel for maybe 2 years now or so, and I'm really having the time of my life just kind of figuring out how I want to do this and why I want to do this. And this gave me a lot of hope to keep doing it and kind of keep dreaming pretty much. Like, I got so many different life lessons out of this, so many different things that can help me in my future with writing and just how things work. And Stephen King, he is one of the greatest authors of our generation. I love his stuff. He's one of my top 5 favorite authors of all time. He is one of the ones that actually got me into reading in the first place because of the way that he is able to convey stories, and it really helped me kind of figure out what was kind of like going on with my writing process, because the way that I write things is I have a vague story in mind, and then I write what I feel comes down to the story. And my plan after finishing the first draft is to let it sit for a little bit and then go back in and figuring out what exactly I want to show within this story and why it is important to these characters and such. And he really helped me kind of understand with the fact of, you may publish this for millions, if not like hundreds of millions of people to read potentially through traditional publishing at least, but you never like need to like cater it to the bigger person, pretty much. You don't need to dedicate it to like the bigger people, pretty much. You really only need to write it with one person in mind, and as long as you have that one person, then you'll do great. You'll be perfectly fine, you know? And I loved it. I personally don't rate nonfiction as well too. I think you guys know this by now at least. And I would 100% recommend this to pretty much every single person that I come across in, whether they are learning how to write a novel or just want to know exactly what his process is and how he writes his things. Because it's kind of like a memoir of his life while also kind of like a writing guide book as well, which I really did like, to say the least. It was amazing, to say the least. It was absolutely amazing. Just completely amazing. I would recommend as well too. And then this next one was also supposed to be in that vlog, and that is Listen for the Lie by Amy Tintira. This is a mystery / thriller, and I gave it a 4-star. I really liked it. I got very captivated by it and such. And basically what it is it follows these 2 girls named Lucy and Savvy. Lucy is kind of like the person who kind of has like the dream life, and Savvy, she's the very much social butterfly. And one night you find out that Savvy gets murdered and Lucy is covered in her blood, and she doesn't know why she's covered in her best friend's blood. And for many years, people think that Lucy killed Savvy. And then this podcast called Listen for the Lie, a true crime podcast hosted by this dude named Ben Owens, decided to investigate Savvy's murder for the show's 2nd season. And kind of like wants to kind of figure out whether Lucy did kill Savvy or not. And one of the main things that really kind of enticed me with this book is the added element of the podcast. I love true crime podcasts. Morbid is my absolute favorite podcast of all goddamn time. I love Ash and Elena so much. So when I heard that the audiobook had an element of podcasting, I immediately got curious and got really excited. And I think that's also one of the things that like draws people in as well too. But the thing that I really loved the most was seeing it in Lucy's point of view and also seeing it through the eyes of Listen for the Lie. It was really good in my opinion, in the way that Lucy told her story and how we found out about everything and such. Again, this is a mystery. You want to go into this like fairly blind and such. The only thing that really kind of threw me off was the division of the podcast episodes. You know, in my opinion, the way that the podcast episodes were kind of chopped up or like spliced up, it kind of almost took me out of the story a little bit, and I was kind of getting a little bit sad to get into the podcast elements of things. And it was just one of those things where I was like, okay, I guess we're doing this, you know? I guess, honestly. And I would recommend it, but I would recommend that you listen to it because the plot twist, well, it's not the most, it's an interesting plot twist, I will say that, but it didn't like knock my socks off, you know? I don't know if that makes any sense, to say the least. But I would 100% recommend this. I read it maybe within like a span of like 2 days maybe, or maybe even like a day and a half or something like that. It was very intoxicating. I listened to it pretty much every single chance I could, and yeah, that's pretty much it. And then the next one that I have is not in the physical copy, and that is Nora Goes Off Script by Annabelle Monaghan. I gave this a 3-star when I read it. It was on my 25 books to read, or 26 books to read in 2026, and I've had it on my TBR for a long time. And Annabelle Monaghan has been a author that has been popping up in recent years, pretty much. And I got really curious because mostly I've heard that she does like women's fiction and things like that. And with this one, it basically follows a woman who is a script writer. Her name is Nora, and she writes a movie based about her divorce and her life. And basically the studio was like, hey, we will pay you if we could shoot at your house. So she was like, sweet, let's go to my house or whatever, you know? And then after everybody has packed up after shooting, the male love interest, or like the male main character in the movie, decides to stay on Nora's property for a little bit, at least, to say the least, you know? And then kind of following from like there and just things like that. It was nothing like groundbreaking, to say the least. I could tell you maybe a little bit about the plot points, but the one thing that I really kind of remember is just almost kind of feeling of like having nothing to say while also having a lot to say at the same time. Like, maybe I would recommend this, but I personally did not get the hype. I really did not like the male main character, first of all. I really did not care for him. I did not really like see his appeal in the first place. And the way that they did like the third act breakup low-key kind of pissed me off, to say the least. It really pissed me off. So that one was a 3-star. Maybe I would recommend, but I don't know, to be honest with you. And then the next one that I have is also not in the physical copy, but that is The Answer Is No by Frederick Bachman. This was a short story by him and such, and I was trying to fill my time with that one vlog that I was doing, and I didn't feel like starting another book because I was gonna film another vlog on that weekend that I was filming that one, and I gave it a 2-star. I low-key kind of forgot I read it, and I did not really enjoy it that much. The usual charm that I usually find with Frederick's writing didn't really charm me in this book whatsoever. It kind of gave me a little bit of whiplash, in my opinion. I did not like it whatsoever, you know? I don't really have anything else to say because I can't really tell you anything because I don't remember what it's about. I'm not gonna lie, I saw it and I was like, oh, this is a fun little one that can just be like listened to or whatever. I listened to it while I was at work and then immediately forgot everything that happened. I just remember not liking it, and that was pretty much it, to say the least, you know? But yeah, it was just like one of those things where I really am just like, ugh, did I really need to read that? Probably not. That was The Answer Is No by Frederick Bachman. I did not like it, which sucked, to say the least. And then these next ones were the ones that I filmed in my 24-hour readathon that you saw. And that first one is Tempting Olivia by Claire Ashton. I really, really loved this book. I gave it a 4.5. It's still a 4.5. So far, it's my favorite in the series of an Oxford romance. And this one follows Olivia, and she is one of the youngest partners at Bentley Lawyers, where she has very much high standards and things like that. And then this woman named Kate comes into pretty much wanting a divorce from her wife at the time, you know, and Olivia takes her on as a client. But the thing about that is Kate is a famous actress and Olivia really loves watching her films. So we kind of follow from there. I thought it was really, really cute. It was really, really fun and very, very cheeky, if that makes any sense. It takes place in like Oxford and such. So you get a little bit of cheekiness and things like that. And it's also sapphic as well. I really loved Olivia and Kate's dynamic more than I liked Millie and Charlotte's dynamic personally. I think it's because I felt more connected to both of them in a way, you know? And I really, really liked their story. And one of the things that I like to gauge with like romance novels is if I think that they would survive after happily ever after, and I think they would. I really do think that they would survive happily ever after, you know? And I can't wait to read more of Claire Ashton. I really like her books. I found her last year when I was scrolling through reading Meeting Millie, which is the first book in this series, and I really do think that she is someone that I really like her writing style with, and I kind of like the cheeky kind of banter type of thing. I didn't think I would, honestly, when I read this, but then I ended up absolutely loving it, to say the least. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say on Tempting Olivia for that one. And then the next one that I read in that was a novella titled The Fall Risk by Abby Jimenez. That one was a 4-star. You guys know this, I'm not a fan of instant love by any means necessary a lot of the time. It's one of those things where like it can be kind of very cheesy and it sometimes doesn't even make sense, you know, and things like that. Where this one I didn't have an issue with it because I think it was a novella. It made sense in the context of being a novella. And basically what it follows is it follows these two people where they wake up one morning and are trying to head to work, but then realize the stairs are missing. So they cannot get down from their apartment complexes. So they're stuck there for the weekend pretty much. And the female main character, she has a stalker that's a main part of the thing as whatever, you know. And she just basically has a hard time kind of like trusting men pretty much. And you just kind of follow from like them kind of like getting to know each other, having fun and things like that, you know. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. I would recommend that one along with Tempting Olivia as well too. I forgot to say that in my other one. And then this next one, I just finished watching the series that this book is based off of, and that is An Offer from a Gentleman by Julia Quinn. I had some mixed feelings on this. In the beginning, I was kind of just like skimming through through because it was roughly kind of the same as it was in the show. And then when I got to like the halfway mark with like after like the lake scene or whatever, I just kind of found Book Benedict to be really, really annoying and also kind of a dick, to be honest with you. Book Benedict is definitely not my favorite. Luke Thompson as Benedict in the show, amazing, gorgeous, wonderful. Same with Yurin Ha as Sophie Beck within the show. And in the book, her last name is technically Sophie Beckett and such. And mostly because these books were published in like early 2000s pretty much. So there's a lot of changes to how it was back then compared to now as well, and things like that. And like I said, 3 stars is pretty much like a middle of the road rating for me. The show is so much better than the book, in my opinion. The way that the conflict of Sophie and Benedict being together was much more thought out in the show rather than the book, in my opinion. I almost felt kind of like we were getting kind of rushed, and it was just something where I was just like, okay, I guess we're here, to be honest. Very middle of the road. 3 stars. I don't know if you really need to read the books. If you've just been watching the show and you don't really care for the books, you don't need to read them if you don't want to. I just get kind of curious. The only books I haven't read in the series is Daphne's story and Antony's story, and the other siblings as well too. But that's my thoughts on An Offer from a Gentleman. 3 stars. Not the best book, but also not the worst book I've ever read in my entire life. And then this next one that I have is my second 5-star of 2026, and that is This Could Be Us by Kennedy Ryan. I tried to read this in my 24-hour readathon, but I ran out of time, so I just decided that I was just gonna read it, and I absolutely loved it. I love Kennedy Ryan's like writing style, and I knew that I was gonna love it, but I wasn't too sure. But if you don't know, this is part of the Skyland trilogy. It's the second book. This one follows Soledad, and she pretty much has all of her life planned out, and then her husband that she's had for pretty much forever and such, she has kids with him or whatever, he does something that is very, very, very unforgiving. So Soledad's kind of life and her girls' life are kind of upended because he was the main breadwinner of the family. So she now needs to come up with the money in order for them to survive. She is doing pretty good on her own and such, but then she kind of meets a man who is kind of held responsible for uncovering what Edward did, pretty much, and his name is Judah Cross. He is an accountant, and you kind of see them kind of pretty much like being kind of like drawn to each other, but kind of in a forbidden way. And it really does kind of like really indicate that like you can kind of love yourself while also going on a journey, but also kind of like potentially finding love within that chaos, you know? And I really loved the way that it was written. I loved the way that everything was talked about. There were only a couple of qualms that I had. I wish we got more interaction between Soledad and her kids as well. And I wish we got a little bit more representation of Judah and his kids specifically, because his kids, they have autism, and I really liked the way that Kennedy Ryan like talked about it, because she also has a son with autism as well. And in the beginning, she talks about how she wasn't too sure if she was ever going to write a book related to autism, and then she ended up doing it and like or adding a little bit of an element into it, and it was just so gorgeous, honestly. It does talk about heavy things, so trigger warning on that, just an over above trigger warning. And I can't wait to read Hendrix's story, because it follows 3 women in this Skyland series. You follow Yasmin first in Before I Let Go, Soledad in This Could Be Us, and then Hendrix in Can't Get Enough. And I cannot wait to read Hendrix's story because this story was taken with so much care and so much attention and so much love and so much joy and so much heartbreak. And I really appreciated for what it was. And I still think about Judah and Soledad constantly. I low-key wish more men were like Judah in real life because that man has 100% become a top book boyfriend of mine, to say the least. So that is all my thoughts on This Could Be Us. And then my last one that I read in February was The Amalfi Curse by Sarah Penner. I recently just finished reading that. That one is a 4.25. Sorry about the specifics, but that's just how I feel. And this one was basically about a woman named Haven. She is traveling to the Amalfi Coast looking for something that her dad found on a diving exploration. She's a nautical archaeologist pretty much, so that basically means that she like goes down into shipwrecks and kind of figures out why these ships might have gone down, to say the least, and you kind of follow from there. It was a nominee in the historical fiction category, and my mom and I found it at a Barnes & Noble one day, and we got so intrigued that we decided to pick it up. We technically have the physical copy, but it's upstairs in her collection, and I didn't really want to like mess with it by any means and such. And I thought I knew what this story was going to be about, but then it kind of like flipped my head on like expectations. I listened to the majority of it. Not the majority. I listened to it all the way through like audiobooking it, and don't just follow Haven and such. You follow also a couple people in the 1820s that were natives to the Amalfi Coast like area pretty much, and you kind of follow through their story and how it kind of ties back to the present timeline where Haven is at. And in my opinion, the reason why this also isn't a 5-star either is because I felt a lot more connected to the past timeline than I did in the present timeline, which was Haven's. And the stories that were in the past timeline were so great and so wonderful. I think you guys should go into this like fairly blind. I will say, even though it is historical fiction, it doesn't really read that complicated to read. Pretty much, like, you can kind of like read it and be like perfectly fine, to say the least, because there's not many real like big words or things around that lines that can kind of get you kind of confused or whatever. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. It took me a little bit to get into it because of the present timeline. When we were in the past timeline, I was hooked. I was like immediately hooked. I loved every single moment of it. And the way that it kind of linked up with the present made a whole lot more sense as well too. And there was just a lot of things in the present where it kind of rubbed me the wrong way in how things were talked about, and especially how women were talked about. There's a little bit of misogyny in this book, but that seems to be a common thing within historical fiction novels, which I'm guessing if you do know that, then you would be accustomed to that. But for people who don't really know much about historical fiction, you do get some misogyny in historical fiction novels. Overall, I really, really enjoyed it. I think you should go into it blind because of the fact that there is so much that you can like glean from it and kind of learn from it and kind of learn how to be a better person, not just for yourself, but also for the people around you as well. And those are all the books that I read in February. I had no DNFs, thank God. But now I want to go into the 2 books that I'm currently reading. One of them was on my February TBR, and that was Needful Things by Stephen King. I am only 15% into this book. I can't remember when exactly I started it up again, but I tried to read this at one point, but then I could not do it because I just wasn't in the proper mood and things like that. And I'm technically reading this on my Kindle. I'm just keeping track within the brick because it's an absolute fucking brick. But with this one, it follows many people in this town of Castle Rock, Maine, where it's had its fair share of oddities over the years. But then this new proprietor named Leland Gaunt comes into town with the store of needful things. And with this store, there are no price tags whatsoever, while you just kind of negotiate what you want pretty much in needful things, and you're kind of following from there. You're following a bunch of different people in the town so far, and I can't really tell you whether I like it or don't like it. I'm still so like new into this, I'm like 123 pages in, which like I said is 15%, but I can't really tell you much about it because I'm not that far into it. There are certain people that I really like a lot more than some other people, but other than that, it's okay, honestly. I read it a lot before I go to bed a lot of the time because I read it on my Kindle. But yeah. And then this next book that I'm currently reading is for a current vlog that you will see my thoughts in with the Amalfi Curse and such. And that is Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. I have wanted to read V.E. Schwab for a long time. I tried to read The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, but that didn't really work out very well. So I thought maybe I'll try Bury Our Bones and things like that. And this one, from what I've heard, is it follows a bunch of different women from different time periods, and it follows vampires specifically. And like the things in red is like, this is a story about hunger, it's about love, it's about rage, and it's about life, how it ends and how it starts. So like I said, I think my book is actually wrong. I've been listening to it the majority of the time, and I'm on Maria specifically. She's one of the women that is featured in this pretty much. Let me see if I can figure out where to go and such like that. I'm on page 43. So like I said, I'm not that far into Bury Our Bones, so I literally cannot tell you anything about this and how I feel about it, but that is book number 2 of the ones that I'm currently in the middle of reading. And that concludes my January and February reading wrap up. So thank you guys again for watching. Let me know if you guys have read any of these books or just whatever, honestly. Make sure to like and comment down below. If you don't know what to comment down below, tell me what your current reads are or how many books you read in January or February, or both months, honestly. Make sure you subscribe, turn on post notifications. I post every Sunday and every other Wednesday, and as of uploading this, it is a Sunday, so I will more than likely see you guys next Sunday, and I hope you guys have an amazing day, week, month, and year. See you later, friends.